All right, so welcome everyone to Basics of Buddhism. And before I launch in, I wanted to just explain why I thought this was a good idea, this particular topic, other than people just having an interest in Buddhism, which is great too. But I feel like, especially with COVID, but it was true before, a lot of folks are turning to meditation. It just seems like a good idea, maybe to relax, or for any number of reasons. And, um, if we learn meditation just on an app or through a book, I think what's missing is the context. Like, what was the Buddha teaching? So the Buddha is the one who started mindfulness. And what was the context that he taught it in? Because I think when it's learned out of context, it can be a little confusing. Like, why am I watching my breath anyway? Um, and what's so interesting about that? And, what am I actually doing? And am I doing it right? If I'm having thoughts, things like that. So I think giving the context of how the Buddha taught gives a sense of, not like you can't use mindfulness for anything you want, you can, but gives a sense of the intention behind the practice when it was designed, which might help us to navigate kind of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So my first question for you, to give us context even among us, is why do you practice meditation? And you may or may not already have a practice, but this could be, you could answer the question with why you want to or why you do. I'm wondering what you're looking to get out of it when you practice. So if anyone, you're always welcome to answer, you're always welcome not to answer if you don't feel like it.
I'll answer. All those mind monkeys just bouncing around in my head these days. Need to focus, calm down, and focus.
So calm and focus.
Mm-hmm.
Any other reasons come to mind?
I do it now for many years, but not, I would say as a continuous practice, almost daily practice that I want, but I do it for connectedness. It's connecting with the natural world. It's connecting with myself, but also since COVID, it's really been connecting with people who meditate. I feel that when I'm meditating, other people on the planet are meditating, and out of that we send a semblance of goodness. And I kind of feel like it's the only thing I can do in my life to help the situation worldwide.
Wow, beautiful. So all kinds of connection. Hi, Annalise.
Hi,
So
everyone. Sorry I'm late.
you're okay. We're just talking about if you have any input that you want to give us on why you meditate, just to kind of give us a setting of why people might meditate. Robin,
Maybe it's it's similar to what someone else said in terms of centeredness, but to kind of help myself deal with things that come up in daily life and other parts of life, just to know that change happens, and nothing is permanent, and that it just helps me deal, I guess.
perfect. Anything else?
Yeah, I do it because I found that my habitual reactions to things uh, upset me after I've reacted. So it's a way to pause, learn how to pause in the moment. That's something very difficult for me to do. Well, everybody, but fixed ideas, the things that I think I am, or that I've made up that make me what I am, drives so many of the things that I do and my reactions. So meditation helps me slow all that down and give that a lot of space.
Yeah, great. So you've actually covered a lot of where we're going, which is fantastic. So to me and to the Buddha, the point of meditation is to, first of all, to improve our lives. So it's not a goal in itself. And this is something I think does get confused, probably not by any of you actually, but that people think they're supposed to be like good at meditation, when the point of meditation is to train the mind in certain ways to be good at life. So it doesn't, and this is actually really good news because it doesn't matter how your meditation sessions go. And if you don't believe me, and you should believe nothing I say, by the way, that's one of the main important things of Buddhism is I'm not telling you anything to believe. These are things to test for yourself. And if they turn out to be true, believe them. And if not, don't, please. But I've noticed really for myself that a session can feel terrible. Hey, Annie. Oops, I just did the wrong thing. A session can feel terrible and then you can feel totally fantastic afterwards. So it's really not about the experience during the session, although of course we want to know what's happening. So the point of meditation is to improve our lives. And the best summary of what Buddhism is that I've heard was when Zen master Yunmen, who lived around the year 900, was asked, what is the teaching of an entire lifetime? And he answered, this is a famous answer, an appropriate response. So that sums up all of Buddhism in a phrase, an appropriate response. And that doesn't mean there won't be calming along the way, right? Because that's going to help us, and we'll talk about all of this. But really what we're looking to is how we respond to the world and to what happens and to our internal world as well. So the point of practice is to be able to stay engaged with our lives as they unfold, so that we can speak and act in ways that promote harmony and well-being for ourselves and for other people. This takes a number of qualities. It takes a degree of openness, imagination actually, and creativity, and then the courage to act from that space. So how do we approach this? The first teaching of the Buddha, which is, the Buddha, the story goes, and some of it's maybe mythological and some of it's parts of it are true. He sat under the Bodhi tree for however long and became enlightened, and then got up and he wasn't sure whether he wanted to teach or not. And the gods convinced him that he should teach. And he runs into his 5 friends who he had done ascetic practice with before. And the ascetic practice didn't work for him. It took him only so far, like the yoga practices of the day. So then he sat under this tree and sort of discovered for himself his own version of awakening. And then he goes out and he runs into these friends. So this is the teaching. His first teaching is what he teaches to his friends who he'd been practicing with. And it's called the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So that's what we're going to talk about over these 12 sessions, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the 4th truth, so there's some overlap. And for reference, if you've studied Buddhism before, this isn't going to be the exact version of the Four Noble Truths that you may have studied. I'm going to base this more on Stephen Batchelor's research, if anybody is a Buddhism geek. And he's done a bunch of research to look into what the Buddha might have actually taught sort of before Buddhism got codified as a religion. So it's going to be more practical and less about telling you what to think and more about how to discover what to think for yourself is these particular teachings. And it appeals to me. So if you want to know background, that's the background.
Question for you, Karen. This is Judson. Is Buddhism considered a religion?
I mean, it's practiced as a religion around the world, for sure, in many forms. I would say Buddhism in America is really more of a mix of a philosophy and a practice. For the people I know, your average. I mean, I know some people who use it as a religion. I think it really also depends what form of Buddhism you practice. So if you practice Tibetan Buddhism, it might feel more religious than Southeast Asian Buddhism, which is just has a little less religion in it, religious feeling to it. And it can be argued lots of ways. There's no deity. So if you believe that what defines a religion is that there's a God, then it's not a religion. There are gods, but they're not like creator gods. They're sort of, so Buddhism moved around Asia through history, depending on wars and the travel of various teachers, and it got mixed with the different customs and religions and cultures. And that's why Zen in Japan looks so different from Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, even though those are the same branch. Actually, they're both Mahayana. So Buddhism looks like lots of things. And I think it's a very interesting time in America and Europe where Buddhism has, it came maybe in the, I don't know, 60s? Maybe a little earlier. I'd have to look to see when the first Buddhist teachers, maybe a little earlier than that, but got started getting popularized, maybe 60s, 70s, becoming much more popular now. And it's sort of up to us to decide what American Buddhism looks like as really like the kind of, I don't know, second wave of practitioners. I would propose that we use it as just what I'm going to teach in this course, which is a way to train our minds to live well. So that would be more of a philosophy and a practice. Good question. So we're going to start at the beginning. The first thing that the Buddha taught was to embrace all of life, to fully know all of life. So that's going to be our sort of version of the First Noble Truth. The First Noble Truth historically has been taught that life is suffering. And then I could take a whole hour backing that up. And it's not super compelling, honestly. I mean, you can do it. I've done it for years. But Stephen Batchelor's research points to what he was really saying is to embrace all of life. And I'm going to talk about that. And it's a bit easier to swallow and I think more practical than trying to convince you that life isn't as good as we think it is. So first of all, let's be honest. When things are going well, it's not so hard to embrace all of life. We can pay attention. We know what's happening. The hard part is when we get really sick or lose our dream job or living in a pandemic or our relationship ends. It's not so appealing when things aren't going the way that we want them to go. And we're tempted to avoid how we feel in those scenarios. We're tempted to get either really busy or space out in one way or another. And that's how we avoid interacting with the present moment. And I think, we can all think of times that we've done that when things are hard. And I'm not saying when things are challenging that it's not wise to take a break sometimes and watch a movie or have a glass of wine or talk with a friend, right? So I'm not against skillful disengaging from difficulty when that's appropriate. But it's in the not dealing with difficulty that our lives go off course and it causes unnecessary pain for ourselves and others. So this is what the Buddha is pointing to in embracing all of life, is turning toward the times when things are difficult, as well as when things are good. It's just that we're already doing that when things are good, so we don't have to practice mostly for that. So here's how the Buddha breaks this down. And this is going to be a kind of loaded sentence, but it's our one big teaching for the day, and I'll break it all. We'll talk about all the parts of this sentence or two. So the Buddha states in this first teaching to embrace all of life that if we fully know the difficult parts of life, if we comprehend these situations, it'll be the end of the three kinds of reactivity that cause suffering. So to embrace all of life, we need to fully know the difficult parts of life, to comprehend them, and that comprehension is the end of the three kinds of reactivity that cause suffering. The three kinds of reactivity that cause suffering are greed, hatred, and delusion. And those are really strong words, but we'll talk about them each. And there are, a whole range of things that count in those. So even though those sound quite strong, there's subtle versions that we experience all the time. So let's take apart some things from that sentence. Pain and suffering are not considered to be the same thing here. So we're talking about working on our suffering. But the truth is, so first of all, suffering is a strong word. The word is dukkha in Pali or in Sanskrit, and suffering's like the strongest, but it includes things like feeling uneasy, being a little bit uncomfortable, being irritated, all the way through a full-blown freak out. So it's a whole range of this word that's called suffering. And the understanding here with the Buddha is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional to some degree. And you may have heard that. So why is pain inevitable? If you have a body with a nervous system, pain tells you when something in your body needs attention, right? So even though we may not like pain, it's important information. Similarly, if you have a mind with emotions, as we all do, pain tells us that we might need, emotional pain, that we might need time to process and integrate a loss or some other kind of grief. So even though we might not want to feel sad, feeling sad is a sign that we need to have some quiet time and process an emotion. So it's actually really important information again. It's not wrong to experience pain, physical or emotional pain. And we wouldn't really want to get rid of it. Like it might seem at the time you don't want to have it, but it's critical information for our well-being to actually experience both physical and emotional pain. So we're not trying to get rid of pain through Buddhist practice. However, there's this optional element, which is what we'll call suffering. So, and again, suffering is the range of experience from feeling uneasy all the way to freaking out in reference to physical pain or emotional pain. So we have the opportunity to practice to not get thrown off balance by challenges, and so have the opportunity to be graceful and skillful with these situations and to find the appropriate response in the moment. So that's what we're up to. And a few of you said that in your reasons to meditate, which is fun. So that's our kind of background. You can interrupt me with questions at any time, or else I'll just keep plowing through. So the Buddha taught that suffering is caused by three kinds of reactivity: greed, hatred, and delusion. So that's interesting in itself, that the cause of suffering isn't the pain, the cause of suffering is the reactivity, which is good news because pain's not going anywhere because we need it. But reactivity, we're going to train to work with. So greed is the Buddhist term, obviously it wasn't in English, but the translated word to greed is the term that's used for like wanting. So it's kind of like craving, that addictive kind of wanting that makes us act in a way that we might regret later. It makes us off kilter, takes us out of center. So that's what greed is referring to. So it doesn't mean wanting, too much stuff. It's any kind of wanting of something that kind of gets you and throws you out of maybe making good decisions.
Question for you.
Yes.
This is new to me, but from a semantics perspective, is greed synonymous with desire?
Yes and no. So I'm purposely not using the word desire in this. I'll use it now. But I purposely didn't orient this with the word desire. Now, when you study Buddhism, usually desire is the source of all problems. And that's partially because of the climate, the philosophical and religious climate that the Buddha was teaching in. The yogis already believed that desire was the problem. So he did use that, but it wasn't his main teaching. That's who he was speaking to. The problem with using desire here instead of greed is like, not all desires are problematic. It's okay to have desires. Like you might desire to practice to be a better son, daughter, friend, coworker, parent, right? You might desire all kinds of healthy things. So if we say desire is the problem, it gets really tricky because a lot of practitioners then, and it is taught that way a lot of the time. And then people think there's something wrong with them for wanting things that are actually just fine. So that's why I'm really sticking with the kind of greed, hatred, delusion model that is the Buddha's. But know that if you took a Basics of Buddhism class that was focused on the more religious side, they might say that desire is actually your problem. The problem with saying that desire is your problem is that desire doesn't go away. So then we get into a loop where we think that our practice isn't working. Craving's not going to go away either, but we are going to learn to tolerate craving instead of acting on it. So, great question. So, funny, my next sentence is, it's not that desire is a problem. So you caught me before I said it. It's not that desire is a problem. Your body will desire food when it's hungry. It'll desire warm clothing when it's cold. And again, I consider that good information. So I don't think desire is bad information. I think it's something we need, just like pain. But it's the lack of grounded centeredness that's a problem when it arises. Things get distorted. So think of what might be a craving example for you in your life. And it's going to be something different for each of us. That thing that like you want it, but you know if you have it, it's not going to be so helpful, but it pulls at you anyway. And it can be any number of things for different ones of us. Could be relationship, could be a substance, could be food, could be shopping, could be any number of things. And when this thing, this desire, that kind of craving arises, things get distorted and we think we need this one thing to be happy. Like in that moment, it's the only thing that's going to satisfy us. That's how it feels. And that feeling is what causes our suffering. That feeling like, if not this thing, then, I won't be okay. So that's greed. You can use craving example as well for greed. The term used for the second kind of reactivity is hatred. Again, that's a very strong word. You might feel like you don't have hatred for anybody, but it refers to pushing away anything you don't like. So this, I think we all have. It's normal. I think like amoebas have this, but again, in ways that are distorted and lacking in calm clarity. That's what makes it reactivity. So here's an example. Someone you love says something that pushes your buttons. And all of a sudden you're responding in anger that makes things worse. But you literally can't help yourself. So that's considered hatred. That falls into that category. It's the pushing away. You're doing something I don't like, and I'm going to push back maybe. There's different coping mechanisms you might have. So again, it's that kind of out of control reaction that causes the suffering. And if we just respond calmly, that's not considered in the system to cause suffering. I mean, it might not be the right response, and we'll talk about that throughout the class, but it's the sort of state we're in when we act and where our actions come from in our speech.
So I have another question, and I'm sorry if I'm dominating with the question.
No, you're okay.
Is there such thing as controlled hatred? I mean, there's good hatred sometimes, to hate evil, right? I mean, is it okay to have some type of hatred?
So that's a whole long and fantastic topic. I think, so first of all, it's not wrong to have any emotion because you can't control your emotions. So the emotions that you have, you're going to have, okay? It's what you do with it. So if you're in a difficult situation, actually what I'm about to say here is an example. So in that example where this person that you're in relationship with or care about says something that pushes your buttons and you push back in an out of control reaction, it causes suffering because it creates like a spiral of frustration for everyone and doesn't lead to a helpful resolution. So let's say you see something that seems evil in the world, and you want to act against it. And we'll talk a lot about, as we get through the eightfold path, we'll talk about intentions and actions and karma. But the question is, if you're going to be effective in the world at creating what you value, like harmony, maybe, or compassion or love or something, then acting in hate, the theory is, will never really create harmony. And that doesn't mean to let bad behavior go on. The important thing, I think, is to actually act and to act strongly. But if we can act from a place of love and compassion, then we're more likely to be effective. That's the theory. And then again, don't take my word for it, but do try it. And we will talk about this more as we go through the course. And if that's something you're really interested in, there are other resources I can give you, and where we go more deeply into that, including a retreat actually that we're going to do online in April. So, yeah, so exactly to this point, it's okay to hate that there are folks out there in the world harming other people. That's a call for skillful action to make it better. But if we just freak out and make things worse by calling people names or taking our frustrations out on our family, then clearly we're compounding rather than alleviating suffering. So there's greed and there's hatred. And then the third kind of reactivity is called delusion. Think of this as our biases, our prejudices, when we think we know something, but actually the truth is something quite different. So it's the opposite of clarity, and it can lead us to take habitual actions that cause ongoing difficulty in our lives and the lives of those around us. So the Buddha taught in this first teaching that greed, hatred, and delusion are the three kinds of reactivity that cause suffering. And reactivity is the key word here. So when we're totally clear and we're not off kilter or distorted in our thinking, then we can respond rather than react. And that's what we're shooting for here. Suffering is happening, the Buddha says, when we get reactive, meaning our unskillful habitual behaviors take over and we make things worse. And sometimes we make them way worse. So the question is, can you think of a time when you got so upset or thrown by something you wanted or something you didn't like, such that you acted to make the situation worse and then had even more difficulty to deal with? And if so, that's what we're looking to stop doing. And the first teaching of the Buddha is designed to help us avoid this. So the Buddha taught we need to get to fully know all of life in order to be able to muster an appropriate response to the situations of our lives, where we'll feel good about our speech and our actions, and our speech and actions will lead to well-being and harmony for ourselves and for others. And it starts with this embracing, this knowing of difficulty, because that's the part we turn away from. In getting to know the difficult corners of our lives, we start the process of ending our reactivity, and we'll talk about this through the course, how this happens, and so our suffering. We'll still have difficulty because that's normal. It's what we do with it that will either alleviate or compound our suffering. So the process for getting to know our difficulty is mindfulness meditation, and we'll do a little bit tonight. We sit down and we commit for a period of time to observe our experience. The instructions will help us to stay calm and be present while we go through all kinds of experiences. And the point is to train ourselves to pay attention. And not just any kind of attention, but spacious, relaxed, clear attention. Come on. That'll help us stay calm and not react to our greed, our hatred, and our delusion. Well, incoming puppy here. I have some examples, but basically what we're going to train to do as we sit on the meditation cushion, like for example, we're sitting there and our foot falls asleep and we start to panic. This is like a universal experience. Maybe the damage is going to be permanent if I don't move. I'll probably never walk again. Like the mind has no shame. It just takes the situation and runs with it. And if this hasn't happened to you yet, hopefully it happens tonight. You get to experience it. So we're training to fully know and embrace all of life in order to overcome reactivity. So we start to notice what the pins and needles feel like, and it's not as bad as we thought. And our nervous system relaxes, and we're able to stay in a rest and digest state instead of going into fight or flight. unnecessarily. I mean, there are times for fight or flight, but your foot falling asleep, that doesn't have to be one of them. And we train ourselves through that process, very simple, of sitting through these very ordinary things to become more calm and clear. And actually, our nervous system changes as we do this. So we become more calm and clear, and then it gets easier and easier over time to have considered responses instead of habitual reactions. So being able to know what it feels like to be injured, for example, gives us key information on what we can and can't do during a recovery from an injury. So being able to stay calm and relaxed. Also, if you stay relaxed as you're recovering from some kind of injury, you actually will heal faster, because when you're in the rest and digest state, you heal faster. In fact, this is old news, but in the UK, at least like 10 years ago, they were prescribing mindfulness meditation to people when they came out of surgery, because it speeds healing time after surgery, because your cells can heal when you're not thinking that things are wrong and I need to fix it, and you're tense and tight. And being able to know what it feels like to be angry or sad or fearful without lashing out gives us key information in caring for and healing our emotional wounds. So we can be loving and open in our relationships and connect to other people in a meaningful way, instead of dumping the responsibility for our happiness on other people. So in our mindfulness practice, we're training ourselves to actually feel our less than perfect experiences, all the way up to the ones that are total nightmares, rather than any typical avoidance or denial habits that most of us have. And we're doing it in a very specific way. We're cultivating not only clarity, but acceptance and equanimity. So the acceptance is what the Buddha is talking about in embracing all of life. We acknowledge that our pain or our difficulty or our confusion is happening, and we engage with it directly by exploring the experience. And we train ourselves to stay relaxed, to have a sort of emotional balance. And that's what equanimity refers to, kind of strange word, but we'll use it a lot in Buddhism, and it just means emotional balance. And that emotional balance helps us not to panic as we explore our experience. And these things are totally trainable. It's amazing. The mind is what's called neuroplastic, which means it's just like if you train bicep curls, you'll grow stronger biceps. If you train in mindfulness practice, you will grow a mind that's more able to pay attention, more clear, and more relaxed. So that's good news. If it doesn't feel like that when you first practice, don't worry. That's what we're training in. You don't have to come in that way. The idea is to become more that way. And we can all use it, even if you're that way to some degree to begin with. So the key to acceptance is, first of all, to normalize pain and difficulty. Everyone has it. There's nothing wrong with you for having pain and difficulty in our lives. And I don't think our culture teaches us that. But I think it's clearly true if you look to see, because we all have it. So it has to be normal. So any idea that something's wrong with us for having pain or difficulty is just false. So if we acknowledge this, we can widen our circle of compassion to include all of the other folks who are in the same boat that we are, and dealing with challenges and doing our best. And that's what we're all doing. So that can be just really helpful to acknowledge about ourselves and other people. And then second, we need to learn to tap into our inner resources. And I think this practice teaches us that we have these inner resources. Maybe you knew before, and maybe some people don't. I don't know. So we can learn to trust ourselves, to turn toward difficulty and embrace it, to learn that we have an inner strength and courage that we may not have known about. And we can rely on this. And that feels really good, to have that kind of faith in my own ability to sort of navigate life. Like that's something, because I don't know what's going to happen in life, but to have some trust that I'm going to make it through with some modicum of doing my best, like that, to me, that feels very good. So one last point before we practice, unless there's some questions, is that the practice of mindfulness doesn't just happen on the meditation cushion. So that's like the training. And without the training, I think it's really hard to become mindful during the day. If you don't take the 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, or maybe your life allows 30 minutes every day, if you can, it's not going to just pop up in life, because life gets busy, right? And complex. And so that's what training on the cushion is for, is to keep things kind of simple. You just have your own mind, but hopefully not too much else is going on. And then that trains us to be able to be mindful during the day. And then ideally, we engage in some kind of mindfulness practice all day, which, so obviously mindfulness doesn't mean watching our breath. It means staying clear, staying calm, knowing what's happening as best we can. And we'd be crazy not to do that, is my argument and what the Buddha is saying. Because if we want to stop acting in ways that compound our challenges and sabotage our efforts to be happy, we may as well work on that more than 15 minutes a day, right? So we find the mindset and the approach on our cushion when there's less going on. And then we try to maintain a baseline level of kind attention, let's call it, to our experience the rest of the day too. And that's the first step, according to the Buddha, to an engaged and harmonious life. So that's a little outline of the first teaching of the Buddha. We can go right into a little practice, or if you have any comments, thoughts, questions, feel free.
Could you repeat the first noble truth, embrace all of life, and if we fully know difficulty?
Okay,
What
yeah.
is that statement again?
Let's call the first noble. Okay, so, and let's even call it the first noble task. And by the way, noble doesn't mean, he takes the word, the Buddha takes the word noble, which at the time meant like being of a certain caste, like we would think of royalty or something. And he takes it to say someone who knows the truth about reality. So anyone can do it, anyone of any caste, anyone, male, female at that time was a big deal. So noble refers to someone who knows what's going on and is aware and wise. Let's say wise. And so the first wise task, because the truths are kind of belief systems and the tasks are more about engaging, is to embrace all of life. So that would be the first one. But the longer sentence to explain that would be, fully knowing the difficult parts of life, comprehending these situations, is the end of the three kinds of reactivity that cause suffering. So that's the like a longer version, but the first noble task would be just embrace all of life. But there isn't a longer version really for the other ones. They're all just short, and then I'll expand out. Anything else? Okay, you'll have another opportunity. So let's find a comfortable way to sit. You could be in a chair, you can be however you are. You can lie down if you'd rather. So I'd like you to drop your mind into your body, knowing that you can't do that wrong. So however that feels natural to you. Sitting a bit tall if that works for, where you are. And relaxing any tension that might be in the body, face, shoulders, and especially the belly. Getting a sense of being in the body, how the body feels. Letting the body become home base for the mind. I'd like you to notice your breathing. Let the breath be relaxed. Let the body choose the rate of breathing. We can use the breath as a way to gather the mind, gather the attention right now. So just turning toward the sensations of breathing and noticing the breathing. We're going to use the breath and the body as your kind of anchor for the mind through this meditation. So to the best of your ability, staying with the breath and the body, but not forcing the mind. Don't try too hard. It's okay if your mind goes somewhere else. So we're not trying to push the mind in a little box. This is just a way to gather up the attention, to feel present, to feel embodied. And I'd like you to the best of your ability right now, to center yourself in spaciousness, in clarity, presence, well-being, peace, stillness, and compassion. Again, not forcing anything, just to the best, accessing what's there for you now. And I'd like you to ask yourself the following question gently. Can I be with this moment as it is right now? It's like an invitation. Can I be with this moment as it is right now? Notice in your experience if there's any craving for this moment to be different in any way. Without denying that craving, see if you can accept this experience as it is. Now notice any aversion, any not wanting to this moment, to any part of your experience right now. Without suppressing or denying the aversion, the not wanting, see if you can accept this experience as it is. Can I be with this moment as it is right now? And from the depth of your being, from your calm center, relax any remaining craving or insisting that this moment be different than it is, however strong or however subtle. Bring anything that's present that you find challenging into greater and greater awareness to experience it directly and clearly with kindness. Don't try to get rid of the difficult sensation or thought or emotion. Instead, ask yourself softly, what would be a more caring, loving way to be than insisting that this moment be different? And how does the experience change internally when you drop your resistance? When you simply acknowledge this experience deeply and hold it in awareness with care. Tenderly, gently allow this moment to be as it is. Allow any emotions to be as they are. Don't judge any part of your experience. Steadily, with clarity and care, look directly at things as they are. So any questions or comments or thoughts about that exercise, that meditation?
I'll talk. I thought it was amazing. I haven't done a lot of meditation and yoga in the past, but just I could feel everything like internally, blood pressure, heart rate, everything just decreasing and feeling healthier. Yeah, this is awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes. So this is Pema Chodron. Generally speaking, we regard discomfort in any form as bad news. But for practitioners or spiritual warriors, people who have a certain hunger to know what's true, feelings like disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, resentment, anger, jealousy, and fear, instead of being bad news, are actually very clear moments that teach us where it is that we're holding back. They teach us to perk up and lean in when we feel we'd rather collapse and back away. They're like messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we're stuck. This moment is the perfect teacher, and lucky for us, it's with us wherever we are. She continues, most of us do not take these situations as teachings. We automatically hate them. We run like crazy. We are used to all kinds of escaping. All addictions stem from this moment when we meet our edge and we just can't stand it. There are so many ways that have been dreamed up to entertain us away from the moment. And then one more from Mary Oliver. may have heard this. Your problem is how you are going to spend this one and precious life you have been issued. Whether you're going to spend it trying to look good and creating the illusion that you have power over circumstances, or whether you are going to taste it, enjoy it, and find out the truth about who you are. All right, so I'm going to upload these recordings on my website if you want to refer back, you wanted to do the meditation again, whatever. So under the so it's yogavail.com. And then there's a library dropdown. And under the library dropdown, there's already a Basics of Buddhism page. So there's nothing on it yet. The password to the page is Dharma, DHARMA. So I will try to have the recordings up the same evening. If all goes well and the internet's good and YouTube isn't clogged up, because it goes through YouTube to be on the website, then it should be up relatively quickly. But if not, something went south and I'll have it up by the morning. And otherwise, I will see you Wednesday at 4. And of course, the recordings are always available if you can't make the live. And if you have questions, you're welcome to email me, KarenE@vail.net. Especially for those of you watching the recordings now, if you have questions that you want answered in the next video, send me an email, or I can just answer your questions by email too, of course. Anything?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.